It was 3 a.m., and my partner and I were working in a rural community. It was pitch dark and completely quiet, the kind of quiet that's almost eerie. Both of us were dozing off. I was in the driver's seat, and my partner was in the passenger seat. I was half awake, half asleep, when I suddenly woke up to a muffled voice. At first, I thought my partner was talking, so I told her I was trying to sleep and closed my eyes again. But then, I distinctly heard a male voice say, "Oh my God, am I dying?" followed by a few seconds of heavy breathing. My partner and I sat up straight, startled. We both turned to look back into the patient compartment where it sounded like the voice had come from. We just stared at each other for a moment, wide-eyed and trying to process what we'd just heard. Things were quiet for a couple of seconds. Then, we heard the unmistakable click of an oxygen bottle regulator and a hiss, as if it was leaking. I quickly turned on the lights inside the rig, and we both jumped out, adrenaline pumping. My immediate thought was that a transient might have somehow climbed into the ambulance while we were dozing. We cautiously opened the rear doors, expecting to find someone back there. But to our surprise, there was no one. The patient compartment was completely empty. I checked the oxygen bottles. Neither was opened or leaking. Everything was in its place, just as we had left it. My partner and I exchanged uneasy glances. We didn't know what to make of it. Was it a prank? Had we both imagined it? But the sounds were so clear and distinct that it was hard to dismiss them as mere figments of our imagination. We got back into the cab, but sleep was out of the question after that. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I saw something strange. A wooden board which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space lay fractured in two pieces on the ground. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord, asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." I called, and she explained that her last two tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing their hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in two. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped. But I heard something else, whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over. "It's your turn. It's your turn." I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try to unwind. Then a fuse blew. My pet budgie, Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car, and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, it comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I started working at a call center in Mumbai when I was 19. The night shifts helped me manage both my job and my graduation studies, allowing me to pay my tuition fees. I often took the last shift, from 5:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. It helped me manage my college and work. One Friday night, I was working late past 2:30 a.m., catching up on notes and follow-ups. The office was empty by 3 a.m. as everyone had left early to celebrate RNR, an event to reward the best employees. It was unusually cold and quiet, but I chalked it up to the AC. A guy approached me and asked if I needed help. I smiled and said, "No thanks," not wanting my superiors to think I needed assistance. Being new to the job, I often took longer to complete procedures and updates. He then asked when I was logging out. I replied, "As soon as I finish these notes." He advised me, "Don't stay up too late. Stress isn't good for your health." His understanding made me feel better. When I finished my work, I looked for him, but he was gone. I assumed he had left. The next day, I returned to my shift and looked for the guy, but he wasn't there. As I logged in and checked my emails, a chill ran down my spine. I read a condolence notice with his picture. He had died the same day he met me by suicide, under work pressure. I was stunned. How could it be possible? I had seen him the night before. I told my team leader, but he laughed it off, saying the guy hadn't reported to work and was found dead in his apartment by his wife that afternoon. I felt immense sorrow for him and decided to leave that workplace, fearing the consequences that the job might have on me as well. I've never lived in a haunted house, but my mother did when she was a teen. Other houses on her street had strange things going on too. A few homes away from her lived a family with a daughter who went to bed one night with a bad headache. The next day, she was dead. She'd passed away from an aneurysm. After her funeral, the family decided to go away to get their minds off the tragedy, and the father asked my uncle, my mom's brother, to check on their pets. My mom and dad, who were dating at the time, went with him. My mother had heard there was a grand piano in the house and she wanted to play it. My dad was studying to be a veterinarian, so he was interested in checking on the animals. After entering the house, my uncle and my father headed to the basement to see the pets, and my mother went to the piano on the ground floor. She was playing it when she felt something brush against her ankles. She thought a cat must have left the basement and walked past her. She kept playing. Then she felt it again. She looked under the piano and saw nothing. When she started playing again, she felt hands clasp her legs tightly. She dashed to the basement door, called my uncle and father, and waited for them. Back outside, my uncle could tell my mom was rattled and asked what was wrong. She told him what had happened, and he turned white. He told her that the daughter who had died used to play a game with her father. When he played the piano, she'd crawl underneath, grab his ankles, and push his feet up and down on the pedals. One night when I was 10, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening, followed by someone sitting on my bed. I felt my leg grazed and the bed sink under a person's weight. "It's just Mom," I thought groggily, and opened my eyes. But it wasn't my mom. Sitting at the foot of my bed was an eyeless boy. He had black empty sockets where his eyes should have been. He looked to be about my age. My heart pounded, but I couldn't move. He extended his hand toward me, and in it was a little box. I was startled but curious. I reached out to take the box. Just as I was about to grab it, he pulled back. I reached again, more urgently this time, and said, "Give it." Then I blinked, and he was gone. The room was dark and silent again, but the imprint where he'd sat was still visible on my bed. I lay there, paralyzed by fear and confusion until morning. For years, I didn't tell anyone about the eyeless boy. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a vivid nightmare, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Fast forward 5 years. I was now 15, and my girlfriend had come over to do homework. After we finished, she took a nap while waiting for her parents to pick her up. When they arrived, I went to wake her. She opened her eyes suddenly and looked up at the corner where the wall met the ceiling. Her eyes widened in terror and she pointed. Then she just went back to sleep. I shook her again, harder this time, and she came to full consciousness. I told her what she had done, and she looked haunted. "Up on the wall," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there, in a Spider-Man pose, staring at me." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't told her or anyone else about the Eyeless Boy I had seen 5 years earlier. The exact description, the same Eyeless Boy now appearing to her in my room.